The old lady's paying today. That's what her pension is for, right? My daughter-in-law, Paige, blurted out with a shrill, obnoxious laugh, raising her glass of white wine, sitting at the far end of the long restaurant table. I, Evelyn Brooks, 68 years old, kept my eyes glued to my glass of sparkling water. Surrounding me were 10 people I barely knew. Paige's parents, her siblings, and an uncle or two, all scanning the menus with greedy eyes. Just minutes earlier, Paige had unapologetically ordered grilled lobster and premium ribeye steaks for her entire family. My son, Colin, just sat there smiling nervously, shrinking into his chair and nodding along with his wife's every whim just to avoid a scene. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't slam my hands on the table or demand respect in front of a bunch of strangers. I just sat back and observed. For the past 2 years, I had been sharing my own home with Colin and Paige, who had supposedly moved in just for a few months to save up for a down payment. In that time, I had gone from being the proud owner of my home to an invisible live-in chef. I was the one footing the bill for the weekly groceries, the one who bit her tongue just to keep the peace. But that laugh in the restaurant, that blatant, cruel mockery of my modest widow's pension, was the final straw. The waiter approached the table to pour the first bottles of imported wine, catering to a crowd that was happily celebrating a feast on my dime. Without a word, I picked up my black leather purse, slung it over my shoulder, and slowly stood up. Going to the restroom. "Mom?" Paige asked, not even bothering to hide the smirk on her face. "No," I replied, my voice completely flat. "I'm going home. Enjoy your dinner." Before my son could even process what was happening or stammer out a word of confusion, I turned on my heel and walked out. I navigated through the dimly lit, elegant dining room, pushed open the heavy glass doors, and stepped out into the crisp night air. I raised my hand, hailed the first available taxi, and slid into the back seat. As the car pulled away from the restaurant, I didn't feel sad, and I wasn't blindingly angry. For the first time in months, I felt absolute, crystal clear certainty about what I needed to do next. The cab ride back to the suburbs took about 20 minutes. I watched the city lights blur past my window, just breathing in the quiet of the car. When we pulled up to my street, I paid the driver with a $20 bill and walked up my driveway. It was a beautiful, spacious home, the only real asset my late husband and I had managed to pay off after decades of hard work. When I opened the front door, the silence hugged me like an old friend. I flipped on the hallway light and walked straight into the kitchen. There, scattered across my granite countertops, was the disaster Paige had left behind that afternoon. Sticky coffee mugs, ripped cookie wrappers, and plates crusted with dried salsa. Up until yesterday, my routine dictated that I'd scrub all of this before going to bed, so my daughter-in-law could wake up to a spotless kitchen. Not tonight. I opened the bottom cabinet and pulled out a heavy-duty black trash bag. With precise, unhurried movements, I swept all the leftover food, the crumpled napkins, and the dirty paper plates Paige loved to leave lying around straight into the garbage. I cleaned only my small section of the counter, hand-washed my personal coffee mug, and left the rest of their crusty dishes piled high in the sink. Then, I walked over to the entryway console table. In a little ceramic dish near the mail, Colin and Paige always kept their spare set of house keys. I scooped them up, dropped them into my cardigan pocket, and closed the heavy wooden front door. But I didn't just turn the knob. I reached up and threw the heavy steel deadbolt, the one that could only be unlocked from the inside. I brewed myself a cup of chamomile tea, settled into my favorite recliner in the dim living room, and waited. I knew perfectly well that grilled lobster takes at least 40 minutes to prepare, and the moment of truth back at that restaurant was rapidly approaching. Just as I took my first sip of hot tea, my cell phone lit up on the coffee table, buzzing with frantic urgency. The phone buzzed once, twice, 3 times. I set my mug down on a coaster, picked up the device, and swiped the screen to answer. I didn't even say hello. "Mom," Colin's voice was muffled, high-pitched, and laced with sheer panic. In the background, I could hear the tense hum of the restaurant and the clinking of silverware. "Mom, where are you?" The waiter just brought the check. It's over $1,200. Paige thought you left your card with us, or that you told the manager to put it on your tab. "I'm at home, Colin," I said, leaning my head back against my chair. "But, Mom, we don't have the room on our credit cards to cover this. There are 10 people here eating lobster. Paige's parents are staring at us. You need to come back right now or Zelle me the money. The manager won't let us leave." I didn't raise my voice. I didn't throw a dramatic fit or cry tears of disappointment. My tone was as casual as if we were discussing the weather. "Your wife invited her family to a banquet. Colin, therefore, your wife is paying for the banquet. I never offered to finance a dinner party for strangers, especially not after hearing exactly how you all plan to drain my pension. Mom, please, Paige was just joking. You know how she is. You're going to humiliate us in front of everyone. You brought this humiliation on yourselves. You are both in your 30s with full-time jobs. Fix your own adult problems. Good night." I pulled the phone away from my ear, ended the call, and, to guarantee my peace wouldn't be interrupted again, powered the device off completely. I set it back on the table, finished my tea in blissful silence, and headed to my bedroom. I put on my pajamas, washed my face, and climbed under the covers. I didn't lay awake agonizing over the massive scene surely unfolding miles away. I closed my eyes and, for the first time in a very long time, slept like a baby, until a noise woke me up hours later. It was almost 2 a.m. when the sound of fists pounding against wood echoed down the hallway. I switched on my nightstand lamp, slipped into my slippers, and padded slowly toward the entryway. Through the frosted glass panels of the front door, I could make out the frantic silhouettes of my son and daughter-in-law. "Mom, open the door!" Colin yelled, slapping the wood with an open palm. I didn't touch the deadbolt. Instead, I walked over to the small side window facing the porch, pulled back the curtain just a fraction, and cracked the glass open about an inch. "It's the middle of the night, and I'm sleeping," I stated, looking out at the two of them shivering in the chilly night air. Paige's makeup was smeared under her eyes, her face twisted in barely contained rage. Colin just looked pale and thoroughly exhausted. "You stranded us!" Paige shrieked, marching right up to the window crack. "We had to call my older brother to come bail us out. My parents are deeply offended. And now, to top it all off, my key won't turn because you locked the deadbolt from the inside. Open up right now." I don't make a habit of opening my door at 2 a.m. for people throwing a temper tantrum on my porch, I replied coldly. "If you cherish Paige's family so much, I'm sure they wouldn't mind putting you up for the night." "Mom, please, we are so tired. We had to sit there for an hour being treated like criminals before her brother showed up," Colin begged, staring at the ground. "Then you should go get some rest. Tomorrow morning, when the sun is up and you've both calmed down, I'll unlock the door. Good night." I slid the window shut, locked it, and pulled the curtain back into place. I completely ignored the next 5 minutes of muffled complaining and door rattling. Eventually, I heard their footsteps retreating down the concrete driveway, followed by the aggressive roar of Colin's car engine as they sped off. The house wrapped me in its protective silence once more. I went back to bed, well aware that the real storm hadn't passed. It was just waiting for morning. But I was ready. At 8 o'clock the next morning, I finally threw the deadbolt. The morning sun was pouring through the living room windows, warming the hardwood floors. I strolled into the kitchen, turned on the coffee maker, and prepared exactly 1 mug of black coffee and a single slice of toast. I had just sat down at my little breakfast nook when I heard a key aggressively turning in the lock. Colin and Paige dragged themselves through the front door. Paige violently tossed her purse onto the sofa and marched straight into the kitchen, her eyes bloodshot from a miserable night's sleep. "What you did last night was unforgivable," Paige snapped, crossing her arms, clearly waiting for my usual apologetic groveling. "You're lucky we didn't call a locksmith to drill through the door of our house." I took a slow sip of my coffee, savoring the bitter warmth, before looking her dead in the eye. "It is my house, Paige. My name is on the deed. You live here out of my generosity." Colin rushed into the kitchen, desperately trying to defuse the ticking time bomb. "Mom, Paige, please, just stop. We're exhausted." "Mom, did you make coffee? Is there any breakfast? I'm starving and we have to get to work." "My coffee is in this mug," I pointed out. "If you want to make yourself something, the pantry is right there, but just a heads up, I won't be doing the weekly grocery shopping anymore." While they both stared at me in confusion, I pulled out my phone, opened the Instacart family account Colin had set up months ago, and deleted my credit card from the payment methods. For 2 solid years, every carton of milk, every expensive cut of steak Paige demanded, and every bottle of laundry detergent had been funded directly from my savings. "What are you doing?" Paige demanded, catching the movement on my screen. "Adjusting my finances. Since my pension is apparently a source of public comedy, I've decided to spend it exclusively on myself. You have 15 minutes to make your own breakfast before you have to leave for work. Please wash whatever you dirty." I picked up my plate and my mug and walked right out of the kitchen, leaving my daughter-in-law with her jaw on the floor and my son staring blankly at an empty coffee pot. By Saturday morning, the tension in the house was thick enough to cut with a knife. Paige sat on the couch, trying to place her usual massive grocery delivery order on her phone, loading up the cart with imported cheeses, wild-caught salmon, and pricey wines, just like she did every single week. When she hit checkout, the app declined the charge. Furious, she stomped out to the backyard where I was peacefully watering my rose bushes. "The app is broken. You took your card off," she accused, shoving her phone screen in my face like it was criminal evidence. "I did. I told you I was doing that on Thursday," I replied, not breaking my rhythm with the hose. "We are trying to save up for our own place. We can't afford to blow our paychecks on expensive groceries. You know that. We are a family. We're supposed to support each other." I twisted the nozzle to shut off the water. I dried my hands on my apron and faced her squarely. "Family respects one another. I opened the doors of my home so you could save money, not so I could bankroll your lifestyle while you gorge on lobster behind my back. If you can't afford salmon, buy chicken. If you can't afford wine, drink tap water. I'll be buying my own food from now on." That very afternoon, while Colin and Paige were in their bedroom loudly arguing about how they were going to pay for groceries, a delivery truck pulled up to the curb. The driver unloaded a medium-sized box, and I directed him to carry it straight into my master bedroom. It was a compact, ultra-quiet mini-fridge. I plugged it into the corner of my room and stocked it with my milk, fresh fruit, yogurt, and cheese. I was done fighting for real estate in the main refrigerator, and I certainly wasn't going to police whether they were stealing my food. I simply removed my contributions from the common areas. When Colin went looking for the petty cash box, I usually left on the hallway console to cover the electric bill. He found empty space. The financial control of the household had shifted gears without a single raised voice. Realizing that direct confrontation wasn't working, Paige decided to mark her territory. On Sunday afternoon, she invited 3 of her cousins over under the guise of watching a movie and relaxing. Her obvious plan was to make me feel so awkward that I'd retreat to my bedroom and lock myself away, which is exactly what I used to do whenever she had loud guests over. The cousins arrived, chattering loudly, and immediately hijacked the large sectional sofa. Paige cranked the TV volume up to a deafening level. They broke out snacks and sodas, which Colin had been forced to pay for out of his own pocket. Instead of quietly disappearing, I walked out of my room wearing my most comfortable clothes. I marched right to the center of the living room and took a seat in my large, single recliner, positioned directly in the line of sight between their couch and the television. I brought along a thick crossword puzzle book and a portable radio. "Hey, we're trying to watch a movie here," Paige said, her jaw tight. "That's wonderful. And I'm doing my crossword," I replied pleasantly. I clicked on my little radio, keeping the volume low but undeniably present, tuning it to a classical instrumental station. The cousins exchanged highly uncomfortable glances. Paige scoffed. "We can't hear the dialogue if you're sitting in the middle of the room making noise." "Wouldn't you be more comfortable in your room?" "I'm incredibly comfortable in my own living room, but thank you for your concern. The natural light from this window is just unbeatable." I smiled, circling a word with my red pen. Paige tried turning the TV volume up even higher, but the vibe was thoroughly killed. My calm, immovable presence right in the middle of the room made it impossible for them to relax. About an hour later, the cousins muttered some vague excuses and awkwardly saw themselves out. The second the front door clicked shut behind them, I picked up the AC remote, turned the system completely off, slipped the remote into my cardigan pocket, and strolled back to my bedroom, leaving Paige seething in a silent, rapidly warming living room. The silent war raged on. Frustrated that she'd lost her grip on the living room and the free groceries, Paige resorted to weaponized incompetence. She stopped picking up after herself entirely. Her shoes multiplied in the entryway. Her jackets were draped over the dining room chairs. And worst of all, she started leaving her dirty laundry in massive, overflowing piles in the hallway between our bedrooms, fully expecting me to crack and wash it all out of sheer habit. 3 days passed, and the laundry mountain grew. I didn't say a word. On the morning of the 4th day, after Colin and Paige had left for the office, I went out to the garage and grabbed a massive, heavy-duty plastic storage tub. I walked methodically through the house, scooping up every stray shoe, every discarded jacket, every single sock and blouse from the hallway pile. I threw it all into the plastic bin without folding a thing, shoving it down hard to make it fit. Then, I dragged the heavy tub down the hall, shoved it into the dead center of Colin and Paige's bedroom, and firmly shut their door. The hallway was immaculate. That night, Colin knocked softly on my bedroom door. He looked utterly humiliated. "Mom, Paige is losing her mind. She says you threw all her clean clothes and her dirty laundry into a trash can in our room." I opened my door, holding a small slip of paper in my hand. "It's not a trash can. It's a clean storage tub. I simply relocated her belongings to the only space she is legally entitled to make a mess in. If she leaves her junk in my common areas, I assume she doesn't want it. So I returned it to her territory. By the way, since you're here, I handed Colin the slip of paper. It was an itemized, handwritten list. It clearly laid out the monthly cost of electricity, water, gas, and internet divided exactly by 3. Starting this month, this is the exact amount you will be zelling me on the first of every month. The free ride is officially over. That itemized bill was the final straw. The next night, muffled screaming shook the walls of their bedroom. Suddenly, the door flew open and Paige marched into the living room where I was peacefully knitting. "It's her or me," she shrieked, pointing a shaking finger at me. "Tell your mother to move into a condo. We need the space for our own family without someone breathing down our necks." Colin froze. The sheer absurdity of the situation finally hit him. His wife was demanding the sole owner of the house move out simply because she didn't want to pay her fair share. "Paige, you're acting crazy. It's my mom's house. We're the freeloaders," he muttered, dropping his face into his hands. "You promised me this would be our house," she screamed. I calmly rested my needles on my lap. "No one is holding you hostage. Paige, you're more than welcome to go sign a lease somewhere else today. Colin can go or stay, but under my roof, I make the rules." Realizing Colin wasn't going to play the white knight, Paige stormed back to their room to pack. 20 minutes later, she marched down the hall, dragging her suitcase. Without a word, I walked over, unlocked the heavy steel deadbolt, and held the front door wide open for her. Paige's exit was dramatic, but the silence that followed was incredibly healing. Colin sat glued to the couch, clearly expecting a massive lecture or a guilt trip. I just quietly walked into the kitchen for a glass of water. "Are you going to kick me out, too?" he asked, his voice cracking. His voice. "You can stay as long as you need," I replied, leaning against the doorframe. "But you will stay as a responsible adult. You pay your third of the bills, buy your own food, and clean up after yourself. I'm your mother, Colin, not your maid or your ATM." He nodded slowly. "I know. Mom. I'm sorry. I've been a coward." There were no cinematic hugs or dramatic tears. Repairing our relationship was going to take time and changed behavior. But within weeks, Colin set up an automatic transfer for his share of the utilities and finally learned how to use the washing machine. One Sunday afternoon, I sat in my backyard under the old oak tree with a glass of iced tea. My pension was safe. My fridge was stocked just for me. And my home was peacefully quiet. I didn't need to hire a lawyer or get into a screaming match to get my life back. I just had to remember that the keys to my peace had been in my own pocket the entire time. Outline. Story. Outline. 10 chapters. 3,600 words. Title. My DIL laughed. The old lady is paying today. That's what her pension is for. But when the bill arrived, setting Suburban, Ohio, USA, POV, first person, Evelyn Brooks, 68. Total length, 3,600 words. Evelyn attends a family dinner organized by her daughter-in-law, Paige. Paige invites 10 relatives without asking Evelyn. Everyone orders expensive food and wine. Paige loudly jokes that Evelyn's pension exists to pay for them. Colin stays silent and avoids confrontation. Evelyn quietly realizes she has been used for years. Instead of arguing, she stands up and leaves. She takes a taxi home while everyone assumes she will return and pay. Hook. What happens when the bill arrives and the person expected to pay is already gone? Evelyn returns to her house and notices the mess Paige always leaves behind. She reflects on how Colin and Paige moved in temporarily 2 years ago. She remembers paying groceries, utilities, streaming services, and household expenses. For the first time, she stops cleaning up after them. She collects their spare keys She locks the deadbolt from inside. Sitting alone with tea, she waits calmly. Hook. How will Colin and Paige react when they discover they cannot get back inside? Colin calls in panic. The restaurant bill exceeds $1,200. Paige assumed Evelyn would leave her card. Paige's relatives refuse to help. Colin begs Evelyn to transfer money. Evelyn calmly refuses. She tells them adults should pay for the meals they order. She hangs up and powers off her phone. Hook. How badly will the restaurant disaster damage? Paige's carefully crafted image, Paige and Colin arrive home furious. Their keys do not work because of the deadbolt. Paige screams from the porch. Evelyn refuses to open the door. Colin is embarrassed by their situation. Paige accuses Evelyn of humiliating them. Evelyn reminds them they are guests in her home. The couple is forced to spend the night elsewhere. Hook will Paige apologize or escalate the conflict even further. The next morning, Paige expects Evelyn to surrender. Instead, Evelyn serves breakfast only for herself. She removes her credit card from the shared grocery account. She announces she will no longer subsidize their lifestyle. Paige is shocked. Colin realizes how much his mother has been paying. Evelyn makes it clear that her pension belongs to her. Hook. What happens when Paige discovers the free groceries are officially gone? Grocery orders start getting declined. Paige complains they cannot save money if they must buy their own food. Evelyn refuses to be manipulated. She purchases a private mini fridge for her room. She stops covering utility shortages. Colin starts noticing how dependent they have become. Paige begins blaming him for not controlling his mother. Hook. If money no longer works. What strategy will Paige use next? Paige invites relatives over to reclaim control of the house. She expects Evelyn to hide in her room. Instead, Evelyn occupies the living room herself. Paige's guests become uncomfortable. The gathering ends early. Paige realizes intimidation no longer works. Evelyn quietly demonstrates that the house still belongs to her. Hook, with public humiliation failing. Will Paige resort to something even more childish? Paige starts leaving clutter and laundry everywhere. Evelyn ignores it for days. Then she moves every item into Paige's bedroom. The common areas become spotless again. Colin confronts Evelyn. She hands him an itemized bill for utilities. For the first time, Colin sees actual numbers. The free ride officially ends. Hook can. Colin continue pretending everything is normal after seeing the true cost. Paige explodes after receiving the bill. She demands Colin force Evelyn to move out. Colin finally sees how unreasonable Paige has become. Paige issues an ultimatum. It's her or me. Colin refuses to side against his mother. Paige packs her belongings in rage. Evelyn calmly opens the door and lets her leave. Hook, has Paige truly left for good? Or is there one final surprise coming? The house becomes peaceful again. Colin apologizes sincerely. He begins paying bills and handling his own responsibilities. Their relationship slowly improves. Evelyn enjoys her restored independence. She reflects on how easily she gave away her power for years. The pension, the house, and her peace are finally hers again. Ending message. Respect is not something children automatically deserve because they are family. It is something everyone must earn, especially under someone else's roof.